Chapter 5. Consumer Behavior. These questions are the learning objectives guiding the chapter and will be explored in more detail in the following slides. What steps do you go through when you decide to buy a product or service? How can understanding consumers' behavior help marketers sell products or services? When purchasing a product or service, do you spend a lot of time considering your decision? Consumers consider many factors when they purchase a car, including safety, costs, features, brand, gas mileage, and going green. The Prius offers great mileage and is good for the environment. This slide illustrates the entire consumer decision process. This model represents the steps that consumers go through before, during, and after making purchasing decisions. Harley-Davidson has developed this cult-like following from cultivating its Harley Owners Group. The consumer decision process begins when consumers recognize they have an unsatisfied need. Consumer needs can be functional, which pertain to the performance of a product or service, or consumer needs can be psychological, which pertain to the personal gratification consumers associate with a product or service. Functional needs pertain to the performance of a product or service. In order for cat litter to work, the cat must be able to find the litter box, thus fulfilling a functional need. After a consumer recognizes a need, he or she must search for information about the various options that exist to satisfy that need. In an internal search for information, the buyer examines his or her own memory and knowledge about the product or service. In an external search for information, the buyer seeks information outside his or her personal knowledge base to help make the buying decision. One important factor that affects consumer search process is perceived benefits versus perceived costs. Is it worth the time and effort to search for information about a product or service? Another factor affecting the consumer search process is locus of control. Locus of control actually indicates how much control people think they have over the outcomes of various activities, such as purchasing a product or service. Some people sense their own internal control, whereas others feel virtually powerless. The former engage in more search activities. There are three types of risk associated with purchase decisions that can delay or discourage a purchase. Performance risk involves the perceived danger inherent in a poorly performing product or service. Financial risk is associated with a monetary outlay and includes the initial cost of the purchase as well as the costs of using the item or service. Psychological risks are those risks associated with the way people will feel if the product or service does not convey the right image. The same product can represent different goods categories for different consumers. For example, some consumers consider jewelry a shopping good and therefore visit their local department store or warehouse store, such as Costco or BJ's, to find products, whereas others view it as a specialty good that should be purchased from a jewelry store or even a specific jewelry store. Research has shown that a consumer's mind organizes and categorizes alternatives to aid his or her decision process. Universal sets include all possible choices for a product category. A subset of the universal set is the retrieval set, which are those brands or stores that can be readily brought forth from memory. Another is an evoked set, which comprises the alternative brands or stores that the consumer states he or she would consider when making a purchase decision. Evaluative criteria consist of a set of important attributes about a particular product. Determinant attributes are product or service features that are important to the buyer and on which competing brands or stores are perceived to differ. Consumer decision rules are a set of criteria that consumers use consciously or subconsciously to quickly and efficiently select among several alternatives. Compensatory decision rules assume that the consumer, when evaluating alternatives, trades off one characteristic against another, such that good characteristics compensate for bad characteristics. Sometimes consumers use non-compensatory decision rules, in which they choose a product or service on the basis of a subset of its characteristics, regardless of the values of its other attributes. Decision heuristics are mental shortcuts that help a consumer narrow down his or her choices. Some examples of these heuristics include price, product presentation, and brand. Ritual consumption refers to a pattern of behaviors tied to life events that affect what and how we consume. These behaviors tend to have symbolic meaning and vary greatly by culture. Setting unrealistically high consumer expectations of the product can lead to dissatisfaction when the product fails to achieve high performance expectations. Marketers can take several steps to ensure post-purchase satisfaction, such as demonstrating correct product use, building realistic expectations, providing a money-back guarantee, encouraging feedback, and periodically making contact with customers. Post-purchase dissonance, also known as buyer's remorse, is the psychologically uncomfortable state produced by an inconsistency between beliefs and behaviors that in turn evokes a motivation to reduce the dissonance. Firms attempt to reduce dissonance by reinforcing the buying decision or sending thank you letters. Now check yourself. 1. Name the 5 stages in the consumer decision process: need recognition, information search, alternative evaluation, purchase, post-purchase. 2. What differences mark the way a highly involved versus a less involved consumer likely looks at the information provided in an advertisement? A more highly involved consumer would